Hello everyone, welcome back to GGN. This is part 3 for this news bulletin today, October 23rd, 2012. My website is ggnonline.com, and on YouTube my channels are ddarko2012 and ddarko2013. We left off with this article about Libya. The dead U.S. ambassador basically warned about the terrorist attack and basically Libya being a base of operations for Al-Qaeda. It goes down here in this article, and it says that it quoted Stevens as writing, "A number of local contacts agreed, noting that Islamic extremism appears to be on the rise in eastern Libya, and the Al-Qaeda flag has been spotted several times flying over the government buildings and training facilities. While all this is depicted by Western media as a recent revelation made only after the death of Stevens, journalists around the world had documented and warned of the dangers of arming pro-democracy protesters who were clearly militant extremists and actively carrying out terrorism for at least 3 decades in eastern Libya." And lastly, Webster Tarpley in 2011 had published a report titled "The CIA's Libya Rebels, the Same Terrorists Who Killed U.S. NATO Troops in Iraq," where a 2007 study implicated Libya's eastern region as a global epicenter for Al-Qaeda recruitment. Some other news on Libya. Officials provide more details on CIA's safe house in Benghazi. The CIA agents clearly outnumbered diplomats in the Libyan city. When the U.S. consulate in Benghazi was attacked on September 11th of this year, a second compound termed a CIA safe house was hit at roughly the same time. Indeed, officials say they were attacked en route to the safe house multiple times, despite his existence supposedly being a closely guarded secret. They say the safe house was far bigger than previously acknowledged. It also revealed that 2 of the slain Americans who reported slain at the consulate actually weren't there, and they instead died at the safe house. It says the safe house was the CIA operating area for the State Department's ongoing effort to track down shoulder-mounted surface-to-air missiles looted from Libya. So those were when the peaceful protests turned into Muslim militant extremist terrorists. Remember that? Remember that quick kind of sudden change, just like Syria? But it's also kind of interesting, too, because I've covered the article, I think it was from the New York Times, about the CIA smuggling Stinger missiles or something like that to the rebels, which then, of course, they admit that are actually going to the jihadists. So I've also mentioned and reported on how Libya has become a smuggling port to export these terrorists into all the different reaches of the globe, including on Russia's doorstep there, but mostly Iraq and Syria, and of course Mali. So when they say they're there to track them down, no, they're there to make sure, they're there to manage the smuggling port, most likely. It says here, U.S. sending arms to Marines stationed in Yemen. I remember I was covering about how they were sending tanks to Yemen, because the people there are getting kind of ticked off about the drone strikes and that. It says several tankers have also been seen unloading at the airport. They're sending more arms to its Marine station in Yemen, as anti-U.S. sentiment has been growing across the country. Just recently, on Sunday, 4 people were killed in a U.S. assassination drone strike in Yemen. It was the second U.S. drone attack on Yemen in 4 days. We're talking about recolonization of Africa and Mali for the resources. Regional confrontation looms in West Africa. Support in the UN and Europe is growing for a West African military force to push out the entrenched jihadists in northern Mali. The developing plan to oust the jihadist forces controlling northern Mali is moving forward, with regional security talks starting up on October 19th, which I guess they already did, with Algerian and French presidents on the following day. Said much of the effort has gone on military and logistical coordination without much thought on any side about the equally important question of political strategy. Of course, the fallout, right? Kind of like, because a lot of this is because of what happened in Libya with the fighters and that were being left Mali, went towards to Libya, then went back to Mali with weapons and experience and stuff like that. So again, it's all about fallout from the resulting actions of what the West is doing. There's danger that a poorly conceived military campaign could draw many states into the region to a lengthy and bloody conflict, said at least as catastrophic as Somalia's 2-decade civil war. If anything, the prognosis for West Africa, I love how they always call it, just like Syria. When we look back on it, it's not a civil war, and I'll put that out there, dude. It's not a civil war. Syria is not a civil war. This is not a civil war. It's a sectarian war, and it's an invasion to rape their resources. And if they have to divide and conquer, they'll call it a civil war. But it's a divide and conquer strategy is what they use everywhere. If they don't get what they want in Vietnam or Korea, they divide a country up like Somalia, and they just pit one side against the other. And they just watch the body count stack up, bodies to the ceiling, right? It's good for news and humanitarian rights missions. Yeah, it's kind of funny too because you just had the Obama regime remove child soldiers from being banned there in Africa as well. So why would they do that? Well, just because same reason why they took the MEK, the Mujahideen, off the terrorist list, because it's the Iranian opposition that they're going to use and co-opt. So Germany could assist in Mali training mission. Ooh, sounds kind of sexy, doesn't it? Germany could take part in any European training mission to Mali to help its government prepare troops to counter the Islamic insurgents in the North African country. Just like in Somalia, they say the same crap with the Al-Qaeda linked, right? Northern Mali has been taken over by Al-Qaeda linked Islamists, so said the magic word Al-Qaeda, so there they go. AP exclusive, France sends drones for Mali crisis. France is moving surveillance drones to West Africa and holding secret talks with U.S. officials. France and the United Nations insist any invasion of Mali's north must be led by African troops, which is what they were doing in Somalia too with Kenya. But of course, it's steered, it's managed by the CIA, so just like Somalia. And speaking of Somalia, I want to go back to this. Al-Shaba threatens to inflict worst ever attack on Britain. Now, Al-Shaba is very weak right now. They've literally resulted to real guerrilla warfare in the countryside, and it's actually got Kenyan troops, convoys, actually kind of scared because they don't know where they're coming from. And they're pretty desperate right now, but I don't think they're that desperate, and I don't think that they're that strong that they're going to basically attack Britain. As people say down here in the comment board, they basically say that this is not going to happen. This is going to be a possible false flag. So if it does happen, it's done by the UK's own government. And drone bases will monitor China's seacoast. So 2 drone bases will be established in China's Liaoning province to conduct surveillance of coastal waters, local authorities said on Saturday. Then to keep moving with Asia, shooting fake Japanese soldiers or dressing up as them is part of the fun at Chinese theme park. And there's all these crazy theme parks now, vampires and all kinds of weird stuff. But yeah, here you go right here. Here's an image of the 2 Chinese. It says here, visitors use toy weapons to shoot pictures of Japanese soldiers at a theme park in China. It says tensions between China and Japan have escalated in recent months over disputed islands in the East China Sea, and anti-Japan sentiment is on the rise in China. Here's a picture of them and the Japanese troops dressed up. So you got a baby running and everything, and actually I think there's a theme park. It may not be in Mexico, but it's about immigration, about how to jump across the border, and it's supposed to be like, oh, we're supposed to show how hard it is, which it is hard, granted that, about how to basically give them help about how to hop over the border. It was like a theme park. So, a Tibetan man in his 50s sets himself on fire to protest Chinese rule, rights group says. Set himself on fire and died at a monastery in northwestern China in the latest such protest against Chinese rule over the Himalaya region. Also on Monday, a 63-year-old herdsman set himself ablaze at the monastery. I don't know what the exact number is. I'm not seeing it in here, but I believe it was 48 last time I reported on it, so this would be at least 50 people that self-immolated over this. Next up, South Korean activists send leaflets to North Korea. So even though the North Korea's Kim Jong-un said, well, we're going to unleash a total war on you if you drop these propaganda leaflets, anti-North Korean civic group they're talking about. And so did they declare holy war? The missiles fired? No, they didn't. So the Western-backed South Korea pledged to retaliate if it was attacked. So I'm just putting it out there so when you hear all the rhetoric in the Western media about North Korea and stuff like that, you take it into consideration. Asian economies turn to the yuan. So it says here the renminbi bloc has been formed in East Asia as nations in the region abandon the U.S. dollar and peg their currency to the Chinese yuan, a major signal of China's successful bid to internationalize its currency. I believe it just allowed its currency to appreciate as well. Also, I think it was about a year and a half ago, you had China and Russia starting to trade bilaterally, excluding the U.S. dollar as well.
On behalf of the EFD, Mr. Farage.
Well, Mr. Van Rompuy, when you first appeared here in what proved to be a rather expensive speech, I said you'd be the quiet assassin of nation-state democracy. And sure enough, in your dull and technocratic way, you've gone about your course, but I have to say, you're even worse than I thought you were going to be. I thought it was just going to be a federal Europe, a federal union. But actually it appears, with every statement you make, that what you now want is the total subjugation of the states to completely undemocratic structures based in Brussels. I misread the bailouts. I thought that when the bailouts happened, and I could see the panic around this chamber, people fearing economic meltdown, but you, of course, were calm through it all because you saw the bailouts as your opportunity to take control. Just think how Ireland today is managed, Greece for that matter. The sinister sounding troika come in, 50 officials, spend a few days in the country, investigate the situation, and then tell puppet prime ministers what they may or may not do. And I note great enthusiasm in this chamber for Spain to have a bailout. Lots of members here want Spain to accept the bailout so that they too are subjugated to this new order. Indeed, in Italy, the appointee there, Mr. Monti, is very keen for his own country to be bailed out because, to quote him, he fears that parliamentary democracy could bring down the European Union. So I think it's pretty clear that your next phase is for those that haven't been bailed out and may not need to be bailed out. You now want them to sign guarantees, budget guarantees, and to have the power to strike down national budgets after they have been through parliaments. I have to say, I feel that the Eurozone is now in a very dark place, economically, socially, politically, and I fear that the countries trapped inside it, in that prison, will be there for many years to come. So it's odd against this backdrop that the Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to the European Union. It's true that Germany hasn't invaded France since 1945, but I don't think there was any prospect of that happening, unless, of course, what you're all saying is that the Germans are inherently bad people. No, the threat actually came from Russia, and we should be thanking NATO, and we should be thanking millions of American soldiers who served on European soil to maintain peace. Yet I don't hear a word of that because we loathe America and everything that it stands for. No, this is now a divided, split Europe, with neo-Nazi politics on the rise, with violent demonstrations in the streets, and I frankly think that the award of that Nobel Prize devalues that whole organisation. Well, it's not all bad news, because in Britain the opinion polls are clear that a clear settled majority of Brits now want to leave this union, leaving David Cameron as piggy in the middle, trying to pretend to be a Eurosceptic when he comes over here, going back home and claiming victories, but he's stuck. And I predict one thing, big political change is coming in Britain because he's losing the support of millions of his own voters. Thank you.
Technocratic Revolution. All banks of Euro area to be subject to single control mechanisms by 2014. All the banks of the Euro area will be subject to joint control mechanisms since 2014, but the European Central Bank will give time for its entry into force. These are the main results of the EU summit, which ended in Brussels. The European Council President hailed the result as highly successful. This is a small revolution. It means that we'll have only one supervisor for the whole Europe, which will replace all the national supervisors, and if they had it in 2008, I don't think the crisis would have reached this level. Right. Britain has left the EU in all but name, so to all intents and purposes, the UK is already out. Again, with this word, they say this is revolutionary, withdrawing 130 directives. Tens of thousands rally in London against austerity, so there you go. That's and also in Scotland, they're trying to get independence, even though 2/3 of the people don't want it. It's crazy, man. IMF's epic plan to conjure away debt and dethrone bankers. So there's a magic wand after all. Again, a revolutionary paper. There's that word. IMF claims that it could eliminate the net public debt of the U.S. at a stroke, an implication to do the same for Britain, Germany, Italy, and Japan. I've mentioned this before as a possibility. Whenever there's going to be a false flag, they'll follow like with this one, white people's debt. So possibly a cyber attack. Blame it on Iran, maybe? It seems too good to be true. They're talking about getting away with the private central bank created money and going with state created money, and it's saying it's an assault on fractional reserve banking. Moving fast here. So 6 everyday food items that have soared in price. Turkey gone up 56%, wine 60%, ground beef 61%, eggs 73%, coffee, and margarine. It says here rising rents have pushed up the CPI to the highest monthly change in 3 years, shifting the Fed bailouts onto the working class and poor. 40% of Americans have $500 or less in savings, and companies are slashing jobs as people don't have money to spend. Thank you.